Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a resource today that's a bit different.
Yeah, it's not a book exactly, but the appendices from a book called From Every Tribe and Every Tongue, Answering the Call to Global Disciple-Making.
Right, and calling them appendices. It almost doesn't do them justice.
I agree. They're really this curated stack of discussion questions, reflection exercises, practical applications, even actionable to-do lists.
Hmm.
The book clearly intends these as tools, for deep understanding and transformation, specifically aimed at shaping leaders for global disciple-making.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is to really get into these structured prompts.
Sort of extract the core insights from the exercises themselves.
Yeah, it's like a shortcut to understanding how this material is designed to help you integrate Christian global missions into your life, your leadership, based directly on these sources.
It definitely pushes you beyond just like reading about missions. It sets the stage right away.
Huh.
Well, it suggests this isn't just about adding another program to your church. It calls for a response that's deeply personal and corporate too.
Right. Bridging that gap we often see between inspiration and actually doing something, theory to transformation.
That's the idea, moving from theory to real, tangible transformation.
Absolutely. And where this material kicks off is right at the foundation, understanding why mission even matters.
Grounding it deeply in God's heart, his glory, and worship.
So part one, the foundational call.
Right away, those opening questions in the introduction appendix, they challenge conventional thinking. They ask, what if missions weren't just a side ministry, but the very purpose of the church?
Whoa, that question alone is a major reframe.
Isn't it? How would viewing missions as the central purpose, how would that fundamentally reshape a church's priorities?
Everything. Budgeting, structure, how you even define success.
The insight there seems to be forcing a complete shift, doesn't it? From being inwardly focused to fundamentally outward-oriented, seeing everything the church is and does through that missional lens.
Okay, and they push further, right?
Yeah. Do you see the mission of God, the missio Dei, that's the term they use?
Right, God's overall mission.
Do you see that primarily as a divine command or more like a relational invitation?
And how does that view change things?
Well, the insight they're digging for is how that perspective impacts your motivation, your approach. A command might feel like, just obligation.
Whereas an invitation feels more like joining in on something God's already doing out of love.
Exactly. Participation. And then, crucially, they ask, in what ways have we maybe domesticated the Great Commission or minimized its scope in our context today?
Oof. Domesticated. That's a strong word.
It is. They're prompting you to think, has your understanding, or maybe your church's practice, of the Great Commission become smaller, less urgent than what the Bible seems to portray?
And what's powerful, you mentioned exercises.
Yes. Right after these big questions, in that same introduction appendix, there's a reflective exercise.
What does it ask?
It asks you to journal a timeline of your own understanding of the Missio Dei, noting specific scriptures or life events that shaped how you see God's mission.
So it's not just abstract theology. It's making it deeply personal. Map your own history with this.
Precisely. And that personal mapping flows directly into Chapter 1's focus, worship-driven missions.
Okay, worship-driven. What's the core insight there?
The core idea presented is that worship isn't just part of missions, it's the actual fuel.
The fuel. Okay.
So the source asks, what happens when we send people out who maybe lack those deep roots in worship?
What does happen? Burnout, ineffectiveness.
It implies things can really falter. And then it asks, how would redefining missions purely as a response to God's glory transform your engagement?
So shifting the why.
Exactly. The insight is that when the ultimate goal is God's glory, it changes the whole nature of the work. It becomes less about proving our effectiveness.
And more about participating in God's big story, his redemptive plan.
That's it. They also touch on that classic tension, cultural adaptation versus theological faithfulness.
Always a tricky balance in global work.
But the source implies that deep worship helps navigate this. It keeps God's truth central while allowing you to wisely engage different cultures.
Makes sense. And the exercise for this chapter.
It ties it right back to you.
Yeah.
How do your current worship practices fuel or maybe fail your missionary mindset?
Ouch. That's direct.
And it prompts a specific change you can make this week. It's designed to expose that link between your inner spiritual life and your outward missional engagement.
Which seems to lead straight into Chapter 2, emphasizing God's glory as the ultimate aim.
Yes. And the source material contrasts two motivations. Compassion for people versus a passion for God's glory.
Okay, I'm curious about this. Why does the material insist the difference matters so much? Compassion feels like a really good thing, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. Compassion is vital, it's biblical. But the insight here, according to the source, is that compassion alone can sometimes lead to burnout.
Or maybe focusing only on immediate needs without the bigger picture.
Right, without addressing the ultimate spiritual reality, a passion for God's glory as the driving force that keeps the eternal perspective central.
So, wanting people saved not just because they're suffering, but so they can join in worshiping God, giving him the glory he deserves.
That's the heart of it. So aiming for God's glory shifts the approach. It moves from fixing problems in a maybe human-centered way.
To aligning everything with God's ultimate purpose.
Precisely. And the reflective exercise here, it challenges you to pinpoint an area in your evangelistic strategy that might be more human-centered than God-centered.
And then figure out how to realign it so God's glory is the explicit ultimate goal.
Exactly.
This focus on God's glory, it sounds like it threads through other chapters too, chapters 5 and 6.
It connects powerfully, created for his glory and the grand narrative. The source material suggests we might struggle, day to day to actually live for God's glory. It asks if our own self-defined purpose sometimes conflicts with the biblical purpose God gives us. It even suggests that our own good plans could unintentionally sideline God's greater glory.
That's a sobering thought, even good intentions.
Right. So the challenge for you listening is, how do we ensure our actions, even the well-intentioned ones, are truly contributing to God's ultimate aim?
And there's a practical application for this.
Quite direct. Write a personal mission statement that's rooted solely in God's glory.
Wow. That forces clarity.
And the reflective exercise for chapter 6 is, well, it's a deep dive in itself, charting a timeline from Genesis to Revelation.
The whole Bible.
Highlighting God's glory as the theme running through the entire biblical story. And then identifying where your life specifically intersects with that grand narrative.
That really reframes your personal story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Seeing it woven into his bigger plan.
It's designed to do just that. And this whole foundational part kind of wraps up by returning to chapter 15 and the conclusion.
What's the emphasis there?
Missions as God's glory kind of known, and pointing towards that ultimate vision in Revelation 7.9 worship among all the nations, every tribe and tongue.
The vision from the book's title.
Exactly. And the key question posed is, what makes the Great Commission urgent for you personally today? It presses you on the relevance of that huge theological vision right now.
Okay, so that's the foundation laid. Deep theology, God's glory, worship. Now, the material pivots, right, to the personal journey.
Yes. Part 2 shifts focus to the individual's role and transformation. How you, as a believer, live out this missional life.
Where does it start?
Chapter 3 looks at God's heart for every nation, and the questions here are designed to expose potential biases we might have.
Uh-oh. Like what?
They ask, what unspoken assumptions might you carry that maybe limit the gospel just to people like us?
Oof. That's a challenging mirror to hold up.
Yep.
Makes you think about who you naturally share with or pray for.
Versus groups that feel other or harder to reach. And the source connects this to the Abrahamic covenant, that promise where God told Abraham his descendants would bless all peoples on earth.
Genesis 12. Foundational stuff.
Right. So the question is, how should this foundational covenant, which set the stage for global outreach right from the beginning, how should that frame our mission strategy today?
The insight being that God's global heart wasn't just a New Testament idea.
Exactly. It's part of his plan from the get-go. And the reflective exercise for chapter 3 really pushes this. Examine your personal biases in evangelism.
Are there groups you subconsciously think are less reachable? And if so, why?
It's designed to uncover those hidden assumptions we all probably carry.
Then, chapter 4 tackles the biblical mandate itself.
Head on. Does the source frame the Great Commission as, a divine imperative, or is it just an optional suggestion for the really keen or full-time missionaries?
The implication being it's for all believers.
That's the push.
Yeah.
What would it look like for your church to embrace Acts 1.8, that blueprint for witness? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth.
Not just as a nice verse, but as a functional plan.
Exactly. And this section includes a really powerful reflective exercise.
What did?
Writing a prayer of surrender. Echoing Isaiah 6.8, here am I, send me.
Wow.
It prompts reflection on the fears, the hesitations. What's holding you back from fully embracing God's global call on your own life?
That's intense. Is there a practical step too?
There is. A practical application suggests memorizing Matthew 28.1820
Yeah.
and Isaiah 6.8, internalizing those core calls.
So knowing the mandate, embracing the call, then what?
The material then does this beautiful integration of your internal state with external action. It looks at the worshipful heart of a missionary in Chapter 7.
Okay, back to worship.
And aligning time and priorities in Chapter 8. How do spiritual disciplines, prayer, Bible reading, solitude, how do they actually equip you for sustainable mission, prevent burnout?
That's huge. Sustainability.
And then this question hits hard. Where have you allowed ministry busyness to replace genuine intimacy with God?
Ouch. Guilty as charged sometimes.
I think we all feel that. The sources are asking, what does your calendar really reveal about your true priorities?
So the insight is how you use your time shows what you really value.
Exactly. And the material challenges you. How would your time stewardship change if it was truly filtered through an eternal perspective?
What are the exercises you?
Reflective exercises include auditing your weekly schedule, seeing the balance between doing for God versus just being with God.
That's a critical distinction.
Then restructuring your week based on kingdom values. And there's a practical step too. Conduct a weekly time audit and commit to adjusting just one daily habit to better reflect those eternal priorities.
One habit makes it feel doable, concrete.
That move from introspection to concrete action is key. And this connects right into Living as an Ambassador, Chapter 9, and the Legacy of Obedience, Chapter 10.
Living as an ambassador. How does that play out?
How can your integrity, your holiness, just living a life consistent with your beliefs, how can that be your most powerful witness right where you are?
Your life speaks louder than words sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And what's stopping you from evangelizing in your own context? Your workplace, neighborhood, family?
Fear, lack of confidence, busyness again.
Could be any of those. And looking long term, what kind of legacy are you intentionally building with your daily obedience to God's call?
That's a big question.
It is. The material prompts you to consider, who is your mission field right now, even if it's just across the street?
So practical. And the application.
Simple but challenging. Share your testimony with a neighbor or coworker this week.
Okay. Putting it out there.
And the reflective exercise is to study a missionary biography, learn from someone who really lived this out, and extract 3 principles you can actually apply in your own life this month.
Learning from the cloud of witnesses. I like that.
Finally, in this personal section, they bring it right back home. The Nations in Our Backyard, Chapter 16.
Ah, the local aspect of global mission.
Exactly. The insight is that global mission isn't just over there. How have you potentially missed the global that's right here in your local community?
International students, immigrants, refugees.
All sorts of people groups right around us, and they challenge the sort of traditional methods by asking, what if hospitality is simply opening your home, your life? What if that was your most powerful evangelistic tool for reaching different cultures locally?
Wow. Hospitality is mission.
And the reflective exercise and practical application for this chapter are linked.
How?
List 5 local cultures or nationalities you encounter or could encounter this month. Then plan 1 intentional act of engagement.
Like what?
Could be inviting someone for coffee, visiting an ethnic market nearby, attending a cultural event, something intentional. It also prompts reflection on your own openness to hospitality and deliberately building cross-cultural relationships right where you are.
Okay, so we've got the why, the personal journey. Now, the sources move to the church's role, right? Part 2.
Right, the corporate aspect. Chapters 11 through 14 focus on the church and global missions.
And what are the key questions here?
They pose some really pointed questions designed to gauge the health of a church's missional pulse. Like this one. Is your local church functioning more like a sending station?
Actively equipping and commissioning people to go out.
Or is it more like a spiritual warehouse, primarily focused on gathering and maintaining its own members?
Ooh, sending station versus spiritual warehouse. That's a really sharp contrast.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Where is the energy, the resources? Where are they truly directed?
Yeah. Well, what else?
There's a direct discussion question. How equipped does your church feel to effectively send and support missionaries, both locally and globally?
Assessing capability.
And the practical application suggests you take initiative. Lead a missions-focused small group session, maybe using some of these exercises we're talking about.
Right.
Or even draft a simple proposal to enhance your church's missions engagement. Could be improving missionary care, communication, developing a better sending process. something concrete.
Taking ownership within the church body.
Exactly. And the reflective exercise asks you to assess your church's current overall mission engagement and identify just one concrete step forward the church could take.
One step. Keep it manageable.
But it also drills down personally again, asking what might be holding you back from being sent yourself, whether that's across the street or, around the world. What are your barriers?
Always bringing it back to the individual within the corporate.
Then the sources delve into church planting, chapters 18 through 20.
Why is that still relevant today?
That's the question they pose. Why is planting new churches still a necessary and strategic part of global mission today?
And strategically.
Thinking strategically. If you were part of a team sending out church planters, how would you go about selecting a strategic area for that new church plant? What factors would you consider?
That requires research, discernment.
For sure. And a practical application exercise here is really hands-on. Conduct a mini demographic study of your own city or neighborhood.
Like, actually look at the data.
Yeah. Identify different groups, areas with needs or opportunities, then design a simple outreach plan targeting one specific identified group.
That forces you to see your local area with missional eyes, doesn't it?
Totally. The material also discusses identifying community needs and, importantly, potential cultural blind spots in your strategy, recognizing that your assumptions might not fit the reality on the ground.
Good point. What about leadership?
Chapter 22 looks at empowering local leadership in missions. And the core insight here is why developing and empowering local leaders is absolutely vital.
For sustainability, right? Preventing dependency.
Exactly. Preventing dependency on outside resources, outside personnel. It's crucial for long-term health.
So what needs to change in our mindset?
The source asks what mindset shifts are needed to move from what might sometimes feel like a rescue mission, where external help is always the answer, to an empowerment mission.
Where the goal is self-sustaining, locally led ministry.
That's the goal. And the reflective exercise is challenging. Reflect on the time you were leading. Did you primarily do the leading, or did you empower someone else to lead? What did you learn from that? And what would you do differently now, especially in a cross-cultural or local mission context, to truly empower others?
Thinking about how leadership looks different across cultures, too.
Yes, the source material emphasizes contextualizing leadership development. It's not one size fits all.
And then chapters 23 and 24 touch on partnerships.
Strategic partnership and sustainable growth. The source suggests mapping out the existing mission partnerships a church, or maybe you as an individual, have.
To see where the gaps are or overlap.
Exactly. And asking, how can our resource stewardship, money, time, talents, how can that better reflect an eternal perspective?
Thinking long-term.
And what does long-term success actually look like in a mission context? Aiming for self-sustaining movements, local autonomy, not creating ongoing dependency. These questions push towards really strategic, thoughtful engagement.
Okay, wow. We've covered the theological why, the personal journey, the church's role. Now, part 4 sounds like where the rubber meets the road. Making it happen. Action and legacy.
Exactly. This is where those appendices we started with, the practical applications and actionable to-do list exercises, really become the focus.
So revisiting those practical applications.
Yeah, the appendix isn't just suggestions. It lists concrete exercises. We've mentioned some. Mapping God's mission through Scripture, hosting a worship session focused on God's global glory,
Researching unreached people groups, sharing your testimony,
conducting that demographic study, intentionally mentoring someone younger, participating in worship from a different culture. It's a whole list of hands-on things.
and the stated goal here, you said, is moving from theory to transformation.
Explicitly, these are designed as catalysts for doing something, not just thinking more about it.
Okay, and then the actionable to-do list exercises appendix, that sounds very practical.
It provides a really structured framework. It's almost like applying a productivity system, but filtering it entirely through kingdom values and missional purpose.
How does it break down?
First step, capture and clarify. This is like a brain dump for all your missional ideas or tasks. Burdens on your heart, people you need to pray for, actions you feel prompted to take.
Get it all out of your head.
Right, and you sort them. Is this immediate, long-term, or something needing more prayer discernment, just initial organization?
Okay, step 1.
Step 2, define next actions. This is crucial. Breaking down those bigger ideas into concrete, scheduled steps.
So not just help refugees.
Exactly. It becomes Email the local refugee center about volunteer opportunities this week, or research cultural norms for hospitality in the Somali community by Friday. It's identifying the single, very next physical action required to move it forward.
Making it specific and actionable.
Got it.
What's next?
Third, organize. Grouping these tasks by context. Maybe you have church tasks, local mission actions, global prayer points, digital outreach ideas, whatever categories make sense for you.
Okay.
And then this is key, prioritizing them specifically by kingdom impact. The source pushes you to ask, which tasks align most with God's glory and my unique calling, which are the high-impact actions.
Prioritizing based on eternal value, not just urgency.
That's the idea. Then the framework builds momentum with review and daily action.
Tell me about the review part.
Review weekly. They actually suggest blocking out maybe 30 minutes every single week, a non-negotiable appointment with yourself and God.
What happens in that time?
You review your mission task lists, update them based on progress, pray over decisions, and critically reflect on your alignment.
Alignment with what?
With God's purposes, His glory. The sharp question they pose for this review time is, what did you do this week that had eternal impact?
Wow, that cuts through the noise.
Doesn't it? They even suggest creating a recurring calendar event, maybe titled Mission Review Align and Act, to make sure it happens.
I like that. And the daily part.
Act daily. Each morning, you look at your prioritized list and select just one task that directly advances God's kingdom that day.
Just one.
Just one intentional thing. The question posed is, what one thing today would most glorify God through your leadership or life? You commit to doing that task, maybe even block time for it. It's about making missional action a consistent daily habit.
That whole system sounds incredibly practical for integrating this into real life.
It really does. And the courses also include some advanced reflection exercises, especially for leaders who might be juggling more complexity.
Like what?
One is called the Missional Bandwidth Audit. This involves identifying those recurring burdens or distractions that just eat up your time and energy.
Things that pull you away from the main thing.
Exactly. And then creating a system, a filter using scripture and prayer for incoming tasks and commitments. Asking, is this really from God for me right now, or is it a distraction?
Learning to say no, maybe.
Or delegate. There's also from to-do list to eternal legacy. This pushes beyond just checking off tasks.
How so?
It means choosing tasks and explicitly asking, how does this specific action contribute to God's global glory? Who is impacted long-term by this? And prioritizing those activities that actually build a spiritual legacy, not just achieve short-term results.
Thinking generations ahead, potentially.
Yes. And finally, the kingdom filter for new commitments. Before you say yes to anything new, a project, a committee, a request, you apply a series of questions.
I guess.
Does this new thing align with my core missional calling and God's priorities for me? Will it genuinely glorify God, or is it likely to distract me? Can it be simplified? Can it be delegated to empower someone else? Or should it, perhaps, be declined entirely?
Building discernment right into your decision-making process.
That's the goal. And the stated outcome, the result of diligently applying all these exercises, is compelling.
What do they promise?
Clarity, focus, efficiency, growth, and ultimately, action. It's presented as a pathway designed to move you from just feeling a vague conviction about missions
To concrete commitment and actually seeing measurable impact.
They even briefly mention some long-term tools, like creating a 90-day application plan,
That's that?
implementing maybe 3 key missional ideas you've identified, setting specific milestones over 90 days, or doing scenario testing, thinking through potential challenges in a missional endeavor, and proactively developing hypothetical responses.
So strategic thinking grounded in that theological purpose.
Exactly. And all of this connects right back to that final chapter's theme we touched on, finishing well, chapter 25.
A legacy question again.
What is the lasting legacy you want to leave regarding your participation in God's global mission? And crucially, who are you investing in now? Who are you discipling and empowering to carry the mission forward?
Ensuring multiplication beyond your own efforts.
That's vital for legacy, which brings us right back to the vision that underpins the whole thing, Revelation 7.9, worship among the nations.
Every tribe and tongue worshiping God.
And the conclusion's reflective exercise asks again, how does that specific vision stir your heart for mission today?
Okay, so let's zoom out from this deep dive. We've explored this really rich set of tools, discussion, questions, reflections, practical applications, action steps, all embedded within these appendices.
And they're clearly designed, as we've seen, to push you way beyond just abstract thinking about missions.
Yeah, they seem crafted to drive you towards deeply personal reflection first.
And then concrete action. The core tension that keeps coming up throughout this material is that missions isn't presented as just an optional church program.
No, it's intended, according to this source, to be the very purpose of the church and a central driving force for the individual believer.
Constantly fueled by worship and ultimately aimed at seeing God's glory known and celebrated among all nations.
So the real value, then, of engaging with these specific exercises, it seems to be the structured, step-by-step way they offer.
Yeah, a way to examine your fundamental beliefs about mission, identify maybe hidden biases, reevaluate your priorities, especially how you use your time.
And intentionally shape your daily actions. They offer a tangible path, don't they?
Mhm.
To move from just feeling inspired by God's global heart.
To actually making a tangible impact, both right where you are, in your local community, and potentially much further afield.
Connecting back to the bigger picture, the source material is essentially challenging you, isn't it? Challenging you to let God's global mission rooted in His glory.
To basically restructure your internal world, your thoughts, your values, your worship, and your external life, your calendar, your conversations, your commitments.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with maybe this final provocative thought to carry forward based on everything we've unpacked from these sources.
Given this powerful call presented in the material, this call to live a mission-first life centered on God's glory, actively aimed at reaching every tribe and every tongue.
What is one concrete, measurable action you will commit to taking this week that directly advances God's kingdom in your sphere of influence? No matter how small or large that feels right now, what's the one next step?